Good morning, everybody. It is just about 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time on Sunday, August 25th. I got that right. We have about 10 weeks to the election day, and we're going to win this. As usual, I have Joy Silver coming up on this episode of the Snowstorm. So I want to welcome you here. This last Sunday of every month, Joy Silver has graced the Snowstorm to talk about the presidential race. And it's been changing a lot, and especially in the last 30 days. It's a very exciting yet scary time because, Kamala Harris is the underdog, and we have a lot of work to do. It's really fascinating, though. Joy Silver will have a lot of information for us today. But one of the things that she will be sharing is she will be sharing the new voter registration information and some deep details about who is registering and perhaps why. And that's what's coming up today in the Snowstorm. PromoHomo.TV is all about empowering you, our communities, and our world. Shouting out to my media partners. Pink Media, amplifying PromoHomo.TV across the Twitterverse with their #ILoveGay campaign. GayDesertGuide.lgbt. And KGay 1065 Palm Springs, available worldwide. Ask your smart speaker to play KGAY. Here's the deal, folks. We have two distinct choices. We can prepare ourselves to live under authoritarian rule, or we can do everything in our power to save democracy. And saving democracy is the precise reason I have launched the Snowstorm, your quintessential LGBTQ Sunday Show at 9 a.m. Pacific. Find it at Promo. And here we are with the Snowstorm. And the reason I cut my opening off so quickly is I think it talks about we must elect President Biden. That's how quickly things have changed. I didn't redo the opening of my show. I need to get on that. But there's so much to talk about. I really don't need to delay any further. I would like to just jump in and bring on our fabulous co-host for today, Joy Silver. Hey, Joy.
Hey, how are you?
Joy in the morning.
Can you
Did you know
believe
that?
this? What a
Did,
name to have in this time period. Don't you think
did
it's
you
like
know
an
you
amazing
were
thing?
going to be the theme of the Kamala Harris candidacy,
Well,
Joy?
I'm going to say that in her first run, when she ran for president, she called herself the joyful warrior. So I think we are now lifting that. And God, I thought it was only going to be around Christmas that, I would have to work so hard. But, here we are again. And this time it's for making history. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
So am I. Now, for those of you at home who are watching live, if you have a question or comment on the social media platform in which you are watching, I might be able to curate it into the screen, except for those over on Instagram. I'll pay attention and state those out loud. So we have a variety of people watching on Instagram, and my good friend Rock May, who's actually a supporter of the show, says, Omni hugs and love to you, Nicholas and Joy.
Oh,
Um,
wow. How
uh,
nice.
and yes, and several other people watching over there. So one of the things that I teased at the top of the show, Joy, was the fact that different people have started to register to vote because Kamala Harris is now at the top of the ticket, and you have some data about that.
I do. But before we get into that part of it, I just want to say a shout out to John McMullen, who has informed me, and this is hot off the presses, everyone, that a Trump University poll has Mr. Trump leading in all 72 states. Thanks, John.
Well,
I
I want
like
to give
that
a
one.
I want to give a shout out to John McMullen as well. He is a queer media pioneer. I worked with him decades ago when he founded Glow Radio, Gay and Lesbian Online Radio. And I was actually with him and others in Alabama when the local affiliate had refused to broadcast the Ellen DeGeneres coming out episode. So they somehow arranged for it to have a live feed in a high school auditorium, and we broadcast live from that event. That was just, one historic moment among many that I had with our buddy John McMullen.
Yes, yes. And John is avidly working on the campaign with us as we attempt to turn Riverside County blue. And we can see what a humongous convention we had. And so we're going to talk about registration because that's important, but how can you not talk about that convention, right? I mean, that was a show. I know, Nicholas, that I couldn't even get a hold of you during that. You were so glued to watching this show. And
I
this is
I
amazing, amazing
was.
moment, right? It was an amazing moment.
I was, and in fact, Joy, even the week before, I put it out there and said, "Is anybody having viewing parties? I would love to, watch this with people." And I ultimately learned there was going to be a viewing party for the Thursday night, but I decided not to go because I was so engaged in the broadcast every night, and I found myself incredibly emotional and I just didn't want to be distracted by a crowd of people. So I stayed home instead of going to that viewing party. I was just glued and I found myself laughing out loud and crying tears of joy. And I just was overwhelmed throughout the entire 4 nights.
And I know you weren't alone in that, Nicholas, because so many people were telling me, and when they came back from the convention, and we could only, when you were watching it on television, I could not go to Chicago, and it made that decision a while ago because there's so much work to do right here in the county, and they're just processes and procedures and getting out to the field and organizing that's going on right now. But when they came back, it it was described as, I think, and I think it was maybe somebody on MSNBC who said this. If you're on a Zoom, you have one experience of a group meeting, right? But when you're live with people, the experience is really different. Well, the encompassing, it was like a spiritual experience for me with the convention because in that moment, what is a spiritual experience? It's when you realize that you're a part of something bigger and greater than yourself, right? And that moment where we're all in this moment together as we're transforming what the United States and America and the future are going to be like and look like and how our everyday is going to be. This is an incredible transformation that took place in those 4 days. And I think that was a critical for all of us who were really like, we had to vote before, but now we want to vote, right? So I think that's part of the major difference there.
I love the moment during the Democratic National Convention where right after they officially nominated Kamala Harris remotely from a campaign event in front of 30,000 people, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz walked out at that moment live, and it was, connected to the DNC broadcast. It was just brilliant.
Oh, yeah, and all of the places too on the screen where you could see, all of these other everywhere all over the United States were having their watch parties, and I mean, it was the momentum of it being a national movement was really important. But I want to
But
talk about.
speaking,
Oh,
before,
sorry, go
just to
ahead.
cut you off for a sec, speaking of watch parties, I happen to know that our friends John Taylor with K Gay and Shankar are having a debate watch party on September 10th at Hunter's. Now, I don't mind going to a debate watch party. That's a different experience than having a watch party for the Democratic National Convention. It's like, but I'll be at Hunter's at that September 10th watch party for sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, that'll be exciting, I think, too. And I know yeah,
Oh,
Desert
John
Storm.
McMullen says,
All right.
having been to multiple DNC conventions over the past 25 years, this was the best programmed convention ever. It was brilliant and effective, and DNC finally did their job spot on. Thank you for that, John.
High praise from John, that's for sure. I wanted to talk about something that that the taking back. I want to say it's the taking back of America that we witnessed. Okay, because the the symbols, the iconology, the masculinity, definitions of masculinity, all of those things went through this transformative moment. The extreme right has been patriots and flags, and I will say, and I've heard this from so many people who contacted me during these days. If we saw a flag or a truck with a flag or somebody putting a flag on their front yard or whatever, it was like the flag was already like, oh God, somebody with a flag, it's got to be a Trumpster, basically, right? And now the joy in the flag and red, white, and blue, and just all of the patriot and that whole USA, USA. I mean, hearing USA like that was very frightening because it felt like violent militias coming for us, taking away our rights and beating us up and whatever, abusing. But now that consistent chanting and taking it back and taking the country back and all of the symbols about it, it really moved the needle. And I think one of the person who actually said this was Adam Kinzinger when he stood up and he told the Republicans, the Democrats are just as patriotic as we are. And made it about we might disagree on how to best serve the country is what he was basically saying, but they're just as patriotic and they love this country as much as we do. And this is a major, major change in how the perception of who we are.
Well, Olivia Troy, in her appeal to Republicans, also she's was in the Trump administration, and she has since come out and supported Democrats and has been fighting against MAGA and the Trump regime for a long time. But she said in her speech, right at the end of it, to Republicans, you are not voting for a Democrat, you are voting for democracy.
Exactly, exactly.
Another
And
thing that the Democratic Convention served to take ownership of again, not that we ever lost it, is the concept of family values.
oh, this is
And
really important. I'm so glad you mentioned that
yes, and
because
one of the things that happened is Gus Walls, the son of Tim Walls, uh, was so overcome by his father on the stage, he stood up with in tears, saying, "That's my dad. That's my dad." And I don't know of anyone that wasn't moved by it. And then the next day, Ann Coulter was mocking him, talking about him as weird. And he is neurodivergent, and
yeah.
but the Walsh family was so incredibly beautifully represented and truthfully represented, and also how Kamala Harris defined her extended blended family, both biological and otherwise, that it has existed throughout her entire life.
I'm really, I think that's one of the most critical things additionally to that's part of this family values, because the extremists always center their values in family values, and family and church, and all of this is supposed to be of a package for them, right? And it's part of their patriotism. But here, to show all of the different kinds of families, I mean, this is what we live. This is what we see in our culture, in our movies, in our ads. I mean, ad people are selling ads to people, and when they show families, they're not showing them because there's one or two of them. There's a lot of data that goes into how do they best sell their products. So when they're showing us what does America look like, and we got to see that, and we saw love in those families. We saw men and women, partnerships, women by themselves with children, children alone. I mean, all of these things that were messaging family and love and values and taking care of, and this whole centering on mothers. And my mother gave me these values. And this was like Michelle Obama and then Kamala Harris and then her sister. I mean, the whole piece of it is how important having those mothers were, and to recognize how they shaped the strength of not just the what we were seeing in terms of our the speakers, but we're shaping what the United States looks like, and that it was part of the American vision, dream, future, and how families can make that. We'd never see love like that in anything that the extremists or the Trump cult shows. I mean, he never, there's just, it doesn't happen. There's no love with him and his children. I mean, it's just not there, and with the advent of JD Vance, which I don't even know what is that about. There's no love for people that they meet, and there's no genuine caring. So we've put compassion back into the mix and left them with the cruelty part, you know.
Well, if excuse me, they say hindsight is 2020, but if Kamala Harris had been at the top of the ticket before the Republican National Convention, I'm sure Nikki Haley would have been the running mate.
There are those who say that, and you might be right there, but I doubt if he could ever really accept that she ran against him in that way. I don't see it. I mean, although J.D. Vance did not say complimentary things about Trump all along, he didn't actually campaign against him. And I think that would have been too much for him, but could have been, because they would want to have some kind of strategy for that. So you may be right about that.
So, because there is such a thing as the gay agenda, I know that you have one for us today, Joy. I know that you always come briefed, prepared, and researched for things that you really want the audience to know. And I love you for the time and energy you put into our
Thank
broadcast.
you.
But what is on the gay or the lesbian or the queer or frankly the human agenda today? Because these are life and death topics that impact the entire world.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're right about what is that agenda, and the agenda certainly for the LGBT community is let us live, and then let us thrive, and then and that we are part of America and we're part of the world. And I think that visibility is a really important and critical piece. I mean, LaFonza Butler was up there making her statements, and so we're seeing how we participate. Of course, we have Pete, I mean, but we have our speakers, our people who move forward in part of the movement to govern, and to govern given that scenario. And all of this is really critical in terms of how do we stand up for not just marginalized community, but acknowledging and accepting that it is part of the fabric of the culture of the United States. But I do want to start to talk a little bit about what's happening in the field. And that is, so was there a Biden effect on registration, right? So in the county party, we have a committee called the Data Analysis Committee, and Rhonda Barron really did an amazing job on this. So I want to give a shout out to her work, because without her, we wouldn't have what I'm going to share with you today. If you compared the voter registration for 2 time periods, and that would be 6/5 through the day before Biden's withdrawal on 7/20, and then the announcement from 7/21, and then up until, and my data is up until August 5th. Then we adjust for that difference in time period, and we calculate for voter registration per day. that answer would have to be yes, because the Democrats increased the share of their total registration. Their registered voters increased. I want to say that again, while the Republicans decreased. This is unbelievable. Okay, so you had the Democrats had total party registered per day 331, 404 of them on 7/21, and the percentage change was up 22%. And the Republicans from 6/5 to 7/20 were at 332, and the Republicans were at 298, and that's down 10%. So the party share of the total registered, we're up 15, they're down 15%. This is incredible, because this just shows us that change just in that one moment. This is not, and I would love to have the same kind of report, which I'll be most interested to see since the convention and the nomination. What happened in registration is probably really going to blow our minds, because this is just when Biden stepped back. We increased our share, the Democrats increased the share of the 18 to 34-year-old voter registration. And that market alone, that constituency, by 22%, and the Republicans lost 25% of their share of the 18 to 34 registration. Now, remember, I'm only talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about non-party preference or left-leaning parties, or this is just among the Democrats. So this really tells us amazing movement is happening here. New voters registering as Democrats increased by 49%, while the Republicans decreased by 1%. And the Democrats' total new registered voters increased by 20%, while the Republican share decreased by 20%. So we are up on the youth. And then here's where there's no surprise. The gender gap. Democrats attract more female voters and Latino voters. But what the surprising piece of this is, more white voters who registered Democrat than Republican after Biden's announcement. More white people. So they have this information. And Trump University polls, wake up, because you better dig a little deeper, because we know that you can also see the same data. And I think this has got to be making them most crazy. So this is probably one of the most exciting things that we're witnessing today. Now all we have to do is make sure everybody gets out and votes. That's a whole nother discussion that we're probably going to have today as well. But the fact that more people are registering, more young people, because one of the big issues, as you know, was young people, they're not registering, they don't vote. People who attended the convention said that the young people there were just over the moon. And we're seeing that with the young Democrats jumping in to work with us. We're working in partnerships now in ways that we never have before. This is a movement. This is beyond just a campaign for the presidency. It's a movement.
It is. I think this is a great time for me to encourage people to vote, and I'm going to be back with Joy Silver after this. particular shirt is the crux of the Hopeful Sexual campaign, and it is designed to inspire authentic human connection while simultaneously combating sexuality-based shame and stigma. And the really cool thing is, if you go to hopefulsexual.com, it takes you to an Amazon store where this shirt is available in all sorts of styles, sizes, and colors. And I use the revenue to fund PromoHomo.TV. So check it out. I think almost everyone is a hopeful sexual, don't you? So forget the sexual part of that. Everyone's hopeful. Everyone I know is hopeful right now. With or without sex, we are all hopeful right now. How many times did you cry during the
Well,
National
Convention? I'll
Convention?
tell you what. In the tears part, right? I had worked in Nevada for the Hillary campaign, directly for the Hillary campaign. I was given a couple of choices as to where I wanted to go. I picked Nevada. I could drive there. It wasn't that far, and I was used to the desert, which a lot of people are not. And I knew we were going to be outside and knocking on doors. So in Nevada, in that election in 2016, we won everything up and down the ticket there. But the country did not have Hillary Clinton for their president. So as somebody, I picked this up from someone else, so I can't take credit for this, but Hillary Clinton is the best president we never had. And that was it for me. When she was talking, first of all, the fact that she could come out on that stage and give a speech like that and know what she endured, and still she got up. I mean, they even played her fight song thing. I mean, that was it for me. I heard what you said between the tears. I mean, I was on my feet,
Well, the
on my feet.
response that she got when she walked out, I'm surprised that the building stayed up.
Yeah, yeah. It was a tough one to take in, and the power of what she had to say, and if there was no Hillary Clinton, there would not be a Kamala Harris today. And I don't think anybody didn't know that, right? But she also was really cognizant of speaking to the convention in its energy. I mean, that's a lot of people. It's great to be on a stage that big because you can feel the energy. Nothing like an audience like that. You can really feel it. But she was able to deliver the power of her words, and she was directing it. She knew she was on television. She knew it was broadcasting, right? And she was able to make that mark. A lot of speakers spoke. I mean, I think the other person who was really good with that was Oprah, obviously. I think she was the surprise guest, and she's really comfortable with the television and the audience. But Hillary was really aware of telegraphing this or televising this message to everyone. And it was like she was going directly into the hearts of everyone that was out there watching along with this. That for me, I mean, there was a lot of crying with other things. I had a few tears, but nothing out and out sobbing and standing and just like, oh my God, I can't believe Hillary, because Hillary was right about everything. And she was
Were
destroyed through that process.
were you watching with people? I mean, your wife Atma, but were you watching with anyone else?
Not that day. The day that Kamala was nominated and
There,
accepted the nomination, yes. I was with another two friends of mine, but mostly I did what you did. I watched it alone or alone with Atma, my wife, or because the magnitude, the focus that I wanted to have. I think this is what you were talking about at the beginning of the show. The focus in a larger group I just wanted to be with that group. I didn't want to have, like,
It's
the
the
addition.
same reason I don't like to go to Oscar parties. It's like
Yeah.
I want to be glued to what's going on. I don't want to miss a minute. I don't want other people to talk. I just want to be absorbed in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it was that, and we are very aware that this is an incredibly historic moment in time, and that was the other thing too, to be there with and standing with history being made. It was the power of that as well. The diversity of what we saw, the different kinds of people, the all walks of life people, we had the union guys, I mean, the Republicans, Oprah with "I'm an independent," and just you name it, the women, the men, I mean, just
Well,
all cultures, all ethnicities. It was
and
incredible.
the let me tell you, racist at home, KKK members, their heads were exploding when they were watching that convention because black and brown people were everywhere, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's important. I mean, to go back to what you were talking about, the agenda, or the LGBT agenda, or the lesbian agenda. In the 70s, there were two articulators of political constructs that really were not considered, I mean, they were considered fringe, right? If they were today speaking about the things they talked about in the 70s, they wouldn't be fringe because they were right. One of them was a woman named Mary Daly, who was a professor at Boston College in Boston, and she had been a nun. And so the two people I'm going to describe to you, what's really important, because this gets us into Christian nationalism, okay, because that's a fundamental piece of what we're really up against right now. Okay. So she was a nun, and then she left the convent and left the order, the sisterhood there, and became this professor. And the first book she writes was Beyond God the Father. This was her very first book, which just is suggesting that God, in that moment in time, and it seems like it's not really that long ago, but it feels like it's a million years ago, to suggest that God could have a feminine side, or even be a woman, or even be a blended male, female, non-binary, which is the big thing now, right? But that God is that. I mean, this made her, this wasn't a great thing for the Catholics to really accept. So she subsequently wrote a book called Gynecology. And so it was about ecology, and then how it would look from a feminine perspective, and how the power structures work to colonize and dominate, and just the power. And in this book, she pulls words open, and she said, just remember, they're going to say things, and they're going to say things, and everything they say about you and about the power, anything that their opposition is, exactly what they're doing. This is in the 70s. Okay. And then after her, um, it was Sonia Johnson. Okay. And Sonia Johnson wrote a number of books as well. But Sonia Johnson came out of strict Mormon background. So the understanding of the white patriarchy is where I'm leading to with this, because this was the big thing that they were very deeply involved in. And people thought, well, you're talking about white people, and it's not just the white patriarchy. And it was all of this kind of, wasn't so politically correct. They didn't use that term then, but indeed it is about that. Both of them had a real deep understanding of what this was about, because they had both grown up in these very, very white patriarchal religions that insisted that God was the father, and that was the word, and basically the authoritarian, totalitarian. And what Sonia Johnson said is, these white men, or this white race, is not going to let go easily. And we are going to make many progress forward. But on those final days, they are going to hold on so tight, and it's not going to be pretty. And Sonia Johnson, this is a little later than Mary Daly, knew this. And now all of the things that these lesbians were talking about in these political constructs that, oh, they're radical lesbians. What do they know? They don't understand politics. Guess what? They did. And they
You know,
did.
those lesbian nuns came out and did a lot. And a lesbian nun I knew the best was the late great Jean O'Leary, and uh, she ended up being the executive director of National Gay Rights Advocates. She was a member of the Democratic National Committee, and she was extremely instrumental in the founding of National Coming Out Day.
There you go, which, by the way, was my wedding day. Can you believe that?
October 11th.
Yes, I don't know how that happened, but it
I
did.
was on staff for the first National Coming Out Day.
Were you?
Um, I was. I worked very closely with the founding of National Coming Out Day,
That's
along with thousands of other people.
yes, yes. Well, so the understanding of politics and the power structure, and also the centering on race, because even then people were understanding demographically that ultimately in the next years that there was going to be more people of color, and we're seeing that with blended families, and all of this was going to be, they were going to lose their grip on the majority in the population. And this is precisely what's happening now. And it's one of the reasons I think that, well, I don't think, I pretty much know that this whole immigration thing is so frightening to them, because it's bringing people of color, people from South America, more, into the country, moving that whole being white becomes a minority forward. And so Christian nationalism, what is it about? Right? It's really about keeping white people in power and centering it on exactly those precepts that both Mary Daly and Sonia Johnson were talking about in those power structures within those religions, which are meant to hold on to power, not to bring anybody to a spiritual experience, because it doesn't do that. But this is an amazing thing. So go ahead. I see, Nicholas, you wanted to jump
Well,
in.
I know that this is a bit of a segue, but related, and I just want to make sure we do address it in today's broadcast. The election denialism is already at the forefront of the Trump messaging. It's never stopped being at the forefront, saying that if he doesn't win, the election wasn't fair. And he has stacked the deck in Georgia with putting in place members of people in power that have the ability to prevent Georgia's election from being certified, from my understanding. And I'm wondering, do you think that there's a plan in the face of a victory for Harris Waltz, that Georgia is going to do everything they can to prevent the vote from being certified in Georgia? So therefore, important constitutional deadlines get missed, and then it becomes up to the House of Representatives to choose the president. Is
I,
that something you've heard about?
I do hear a lot about that, but I also, there's a few factors, and I don't think that the actual, I've been looking for that plan, by the way, that legal plan that stops, how do you stop Project 2025? How do you stop the non-certification of the vote? How do you do that when they're filling in those seats with people that are loyalists? Isn't that interesting, the term loyalist? But they're loyalists to the king, really, is what we're talking about here, right? Going backwards. Even George Washington wouldn't take that role, all right? So, but what gives me, let's say, confidence or hope? I'm not sure. I don't, it's more than hope. So I feel semi-confident or optimistic. Harris is a prosecutor. They are hiring lawyers now. I mean, there are lawyers, more lawyers are ready for election protection than ever in the history of the United States, except maybe during Reconstruction after the Civil War. And I've also heard that. And so And certainly, if you follow Mark Elias, you know that that's what they're working on all the time is exactly this, you know. Or you speak to the sisters-in-law, which is Joyce Vance and Jill Wine-Bank, and they're all talking about preparing for that election protection. And so, having somebody at the top of the ticket that is totally aware of the legal system in this way, but not just, I know the law, I know the legislation, but has prosecuted. This is really, really different. This is a case that can be prosecuted appropriately and accurately. She knows what she's walking into. And this is the other piece of this. There's no surprise here anymore. Nothing we're hearing is shocking anymore. It's old, right? So can they hit us with something new? Well, I don't think they can hit us with something new, because if we're tracking what Mr. Trump is talking about when he's out on the campaign trail or whatever it is that he's doing there with his press conferences and God knows what, there's nothing new that he's saying. And they've put on display the entire Project 2025 agenda and Agenda 47. We know what we're facing for the first time in black and white, a followable format. This allows us to be prepared.
Our buddy John McMullen says, when Kamala wins in November, it makes me wonder if the GOP will get its losing ways under control and realize that they have to depart from their losing MAGA messaging and antics. And my friend Lawrence Whiting says, excellent and enlightening discussion. Thank you. You know, for those of you who might be discovering this show for the first time, there's multiple episodes featuring Joy. You can look up the Snowstorm at PromoHomo.TV, but we did a whole episode that's devoted to Project 2025. We've talked about so many different things in depth, and we'll do so again between now and November 5th. So getting back into the horrific effort to make the United States a Christian nationalist country, how do we stop that?
Well, I think that very what we have to reinstate, okay, because it's stated that church and state have separation, right? And this is going to take a lot of work to get to. And so as we elect our representatives, this is something that becomes critical. And I think there's been a good number of Republicans who are not MAGA, non-MAGA Republican. Well, they don't even consider MAGA Republican anymore. And I think that was made very clear. But they don't believe in church and state either, that to meld those together. They're not Christian nationalists. They're conservatives, but it's not Christian nationalism. And so how do you stop the advent of Christian nationalism is that you
By the way,
then...
most true Christians don't like Christian nationalism either. Most true Christians that follow the teachings of Christ, they're not about Christian nationalism either.
Well, it's not the first time that we've met them, okay, and defeated them. So let's, and I think that
The Christian nationalists.
yeah, the Christian nationalists, yeah, not
Right,
the real
exactly.
Christians, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
if we listen to Ultra with Rachel Maddow, we get a really good sense of history. But let's look at how did Christian nationalism become this violent? How did it team up with gun violence or violence, right? So originally, after Reconstruction, the KKK, they were not, they weren't crusaders. Okay, they were basically vigilante groups that existed after Reconstruction and the Civil War. But what they then morphed into, they realized that if they use Christianity as part of their God is with us, if they infused their tactics and their agenda with Christianity, that it would gain more momentum. And so we saw Birth of a Nation, which was basically a big commercial for them. And that and so they were using Christianity. And that's not to say that evangelical people weren't using Christianity to oppress people, because the whole slaves in the Bible, and they wouldn't let enslaved people read the certain sections of the Bible or even learn to read. I mean, it's not that they
Well,
didn't.
the Christians wanted to kill the Vikings.
Well, there you go. So yeah, and of course you had the Crusades. I mean, what was that about? I could go way back with this whole thing. But in any case, the KKK was defeated. This is my point. And so to marginalize the KKK is it and or Christian nationalists. This becomes how we put put that back into its perspective, because right now they have been given wide audience, so you would think this is all there is. And I think we have to now reposition who they are, and I think that the convention really was moving a lot of that. Again, we had invocations and prayers that were done by people at the Democratic Party, but they weren't Christian nationalists or evangelical Christian nationalists. And so religious values, family values, gun rights, gun control, education, the unions, the Republicans, the independents. I mean, what we're seeing is we are huge in who the composition is, and they are cult. And so the movement, and having some of those Republicans say this is a cult, this is not the Republican Party. This is the beginning of marginalizing and minimizing the control that the Christian nationalists would like to have. Not
One
that
of the
easy.
Republicans that I was most surprised and fascinated with who took the stage was Leon Panetta.
I missed that part.
He served with multiple administrations and on the global stage, and was all in for Kamala Harris, and basically talked about how he didn't recognize the party from which he came. Yeah,
Yeah.
in certain messaging, yes.
Yeah, well, that's important. And there are sort of I think, and just from the messaging that's coming from the Republicans that are saying that this is a cult and they're moving away from that. They no longer look, as Bernie Sanders would say, millionaires and billionaires, right? Their interest to have no regulations and be able to use up whatever resources and make as much money as possible. I don't think that gang, that percentage of people, those business people, see Trump as their champion anymore, because he
I loved
cannot
it. I loved it, Joy.
he cannot articulate that.
I loved it, Joy, when Governor Pritzker said to Donald Trump, take it from an actual billionaire, because he is. And what a lot of people don't know is that he has a transgender sister,
Oh yeah,
uh,
right,
who is
right,
also a billionaire.
right.
So we have about 6, 7 minutes left, and I want to defer to you to bring in anything else you think is essential for today's broadcast.
Um, so the most important thing right now is for us to use the momentum and the energy of what's happening, of the joyousness, right? And to be sure that we are electing good representation, democratic representation, non-MAGA representation, because there are some independents that are, and even Republicans. I can say that now, because they have now identified him as a cult and not Republican. So we need to be sure that we elect people from the bottom, from the water boards and school boards and college boards, all the way up the ticket, and use that momentum. And critical for us to make sure that Harris Walls can do the things they need to do is to have the House and the Senate. And so in California alone, we can send congressional people we can send candidates to Congress that will make that difference on the national level. I know a lot of people say California will vote for them, so we're going to help Nevada. And I'm not saying you shouldn't vote, you shouldn't put your effort there, but I am saying you shouldn't put your effort there
Yeah, we need
because,
to elect Will Rawlins, among others.
right, there's Will Rawlins, there are 6 candidates out of California that need that kind of help. And that will make the difference in being able to move forward with the agenda that basically is central. It's center left. It's not, I mean, it's not that Kamala Harris is articulating a different agenda than Biden, but she's certainly doing it with a lot of power and a lot more energy for it. And it's really, let me say this prosecutor is making the case. And I think
I
that's what we're seeing.
I loved when her nieces taught Donald Trump and others how to say Kamala.
Yeah, right. It's not
These
so
little
hard.
girls
Yeah,
explaining how you say Kamala.
before we end this show, I just want to go back to the definition of masculinity for a second, that redefinition that's going on. We know men that are not bullies. We know men that are not domineering and abusive, but you wouldn't know that until now. Because, in this way, because what we're seeing in the everyday, in the relations that Kamala has with Doug and Tim has with his wife, and I mean, we're seeing a man, this coach, this totally, you know, aw shucks kind of guy with the coaching and the standing up for LGBT people and the giving that. I mean, this is the redefinition of what it means to be a man in the United States, and that you don't have to belittle, bully, dominate, and be a misogynist, because misogyny seems to be part and parcel of what the cult is about. Their women are dressing. His wife Melania, do they even have a relationship? But that's his trophy. She's smart, but there's no love there, right? So we're not really, and now we are seeing when a man is a man, he can appreciate women. And I cannot leave this out. I know we have seconds to go, but I cannot leave this out.
We have more than seconds.
Okay, good. IVF was the biggest mistake that the far right ever made in
You
part
mean
of
to
women's.
attack it?
Yes, because we can now hear men talking about families and how it helped them. We heard Michelle Obama talk about this, but we're hearing men talk about reproductive health as not just, this doesn't just happen to women. It's not just a woman's problem for reproduction. The men are involved and have to look at IVF and have to look at how they can have families. I mean, they have enjoined men in a conversation that for far too long was only about, it's a woman's problem. Not anymore. And this is a redefinition of masculinity.
Do you happen to know in which swing states abortion, the right to abortion is on the ballot in one way, shape, or form?
I don't have that list with me right now,
Okay.
but I think
Omni
it's
Muscle says in Instagram, I can't put his comment on the screen. He says to be dominant doesn't mean you need to be domineering a strong silent type, but also strong silent type who take care of priority and responsibility.
well, I think there's a lot to that, and I think again, and I like that he said strong silent type, because men were not supposed to show their emotions, and what we saw were many men showing their emotions. They were not afraid to share how they felt.
Well, Gus Waltz is my hero, and I
Yeah.
hope that Ann Coulter burns in hell.
Yeah, I think she made a mistake there, and I think she tried to take it back. when she realized, he maybe was special needs or whatever. But so it's okay to be mean to other kids. You know what I mean? None of it makes any sense. So I think they really don't know how to fight this. And all of the magnitude of this is making, what is it in Seinfeld, shrinkage, right? There was a whole episode about shrinkage. They're making him smaller and petty and smaller and smaller. And I think he is the incredible shrinking man.
He's probably not able to sleep at night. He's just, that the fact that he's getting his due. Well, he's clearly not sleeping at night. He's on Truth Social every minute,
Yeah, and I think I was just disappointed about one thing that she did not mention, and probably should have, Kamala, in her speech. She did not tell us about her position on her relationship with Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, what's up with Trump and Hannibal Lecter? It's like, I don't
Right.
get it.
Yeah, the asylum.
So,
Right, they're letting people out of the asylum.
for anybody watching at home, if you just, I see people on Instagram come in at the last minute. You can find this broadcast from the beginning over on my YouTube channel. And all you have to do is go to youtube.com/PromoHomo.TV network and click on the live video tab, and you'll see all the live episodes with Joy. And just a reminder, you can help support this program for as little as $3 a month if you go to patreon.com/PromoHomo.TV. And Joy, you may not know this, but my documentary will have its world premiere at Cinema Diverse, which is the Palm Springs LGBTQ Film Festival, the last 2 weeks of September. My documentary is called Tinseltown's Queer, 30 Years Later, and it has a lot of historic footage from my media activism in the 90s. And Joy, I'm going to give it to you for a final word.
Well, please, if you want to volunteer for any campaign, please go to the website for Riverside County Democratic Party. You can find it on the website. You can Google it. You can find us and sign up, become a volunteer. We will deploy you in the places that you are most needed, all countywide. We will be having the, as Michelle Obama told us, do something. We're going to have a do something day of action. There'll be many locations for field canvassing, texting, phone banking. We're doing it all. And postcard writing, we're going to be doing it all. So please go up on the website, fill out that form. We'll deploy you, and we will let you all know we are going to win this. We're in it because we're not going back.
We're not. Are you able to tell us now when you're going to come on the show next, or should I announce that later?
Usually it's the last Sunday of the month, and that's what.
And you are available in September,
yes,
the last
yes,
Sunday of September.
yes.
Okay, that's fabulous, and I love you madly, right? And
And
thank you,
thank you.
everybody.
Yes, thanks to everybody who watches, but also love when you click in and have something to say. It's important we hear from you. It's great to know what we're thinking about together.
See you all next time. Bye-bye.
In a safe place, I got room to breathe. Been a long chase, but at last I'm free. These open woods, I knew I could find peace here. Nothing like